Hello guys, welcome to the third video of the season. Today's video is gonna be a little bit of the debrief about what was the first race on the Bahrain Grand Prix on the 2024. I hope you can enjoy. I know that these videos aren't like the best edit quality so far, but trust me, I'm gonna be working for you so you can have a better experience video after video. So far, hope you can enjoy this info. Let's get into it.
Okay, guys, now let's head into the important part, the results of the Bahrain Grand Prix. On the top spot of the podium, we got both Red Bull drivers. In first place, Max Verstappen, and in second, his teammate Sergio Perez. Verstappen did just another amazing race, taking advantage of starting at pole position. After the second lap, he was already 1 second ahead, and even the Formula One has changed the rule about when the drivers can open the DRS system. Verstappen was out of the chances of Charles Leclerc, who started second. From the second lap until the last one, Max Verstappen had an incredible pace, as expected. He was able to decide exactly in which moment make his pit stops, which were also quite fast and decent, as Red Bull is used to. So, not really much to say about Max's performance today, rather than awesome, amazing, and I would say flawless. Now, about his teammate, Sergio Perez, he took the second spot, as I predict and expect on the last video. The Mexican driver started on 5th place, but it was well known that the pace his Red Bull car has was pretty good, that he can be ahead of Russell and both Ferraris. And he did. He had some troubles making the overtakes on the first laps, but after he was ahead of Russell, there was nobody that could catch him. And even though his strategy was based on what the driver behind him, Carlos Sainz, was doing, he managed pretty well the last stint, where he was on the soft while Carlos was on the hards. And probably many of us were expecting the soft to degrade and lost some performance at the end, but it didn't happen because let's remember that Checo Perez is a great tire manager. So, with this result from both of their drivers, Red Bulls take the leadership on the Constructor Championship so far. On the last spot of the podium, we have the Spanish driver Carlos Sainz. The driver from Madrid did just an amazing race. Yeah, he started fourth and was overtaken by Perez on the first laps, but come on, let's be conscious and let's keep in mind that Carlos Sainz has a Ferrari and Perez has a Red Bull. And even though the Spanish made such a good race, the car differential is still important, even though he managed to be ahead of Russell and his teammate Leclerc. So I think Carlos Sainz has shown us once again that he's quite capable to have good races and that he's gonna give it all in order to find a good seat for next season. Now, talking about charts, the Monegasque driver start on second position, but even before the race start, the team has found some problems with the balance of his brakes, and that problem cost Charles a better performance throughout the whole season session. Sorry. So Charles couldn't take advantage of all the potential we were expecting from him on Thursday and Friday, even though he managed to sort of control his car on the last stint of the race and managed to overtake George Russell so he could achieve fourth place. With the result from Sainz and Leclerc, Ferrari put themselves on second place of the Constructors' Championship. Just another thing to mention is that I didn't like too much Ferrari's attitude about not being there for Carlos Sainz at the podium celebration. Well, in the podium celebration they were, but when Carlos Sainz went out of his car, he seems like to be looking for some of his teammates and he didn't find nobody. So I don't know the whole context, but that attitude from Ferrari doesn't seem quite decent and polite. Now, on the fifth spot of this first race, we have the young British driver from Mercedes, George Russell. He had a good start of the race, but similar to other drivers, he had some problems managing in his car. The main one was the temperatures with his engine. The team was asking him to be controlling those aspects. So, similar to Leclerc and other drivers, he couldn't maximize the potential of his car, and he had to get used to the fifth position, at least for this first race. On the other hand, his teammate Lewis Hamilton made good progression throughout the race. He started on ninth place and managed to get ahead of Fernando Alonso and Oscar Piastri with a good strategy from Mercedes team. He was also quite close to catch Lando Norris. That was the car that finished ahead of him. And let's not forget, Hamilton didn't finish that far behind from George Russell. It was just less than 4 seconds. And taking into account that Russell began the race third and Hamilton ninth, I do believe that was a great race from the 7 times world champion Lewis Hamilton. Let's see if they can solve out their issues with regards for next race next week. And maybe we can appreciate or have a better performance from both Mercedes drivers and have a close battle for the podium positions. As mentioned before, getting into a fight with the Mercedes, we have a sandwich of McLaren, with Lando Norris in 6th place and Oscar Piastri in 8th. Both McLaren drivers start the race alongside each other, and they were quite fiercely on the first and second lap. But Lando Norris managed to stay ahead of his Australian teammate. The pace of the McLaren was neither close the Mercedes before they started with the issues, but it was ahead of both Aston Martins, so they were in quite a race of their own, trying to make the strategy work as good as possible for them so they can achieve a better position. Notwithstanding, as I said earlier, the pace was not enough, and even though they seemed to have good strategy, well, more Lando than Piastri because he was undertaken by a good call from Mercedes with Lewis Hamilton, McLaren seemed to be stay one step back from Mercedes and Ferrari. Let's see if in the next tracks their car suits better and they can be closer for more battles and entertain. Talking a little bit about Oscar Piastri, I think his race was decent, but nothing spectacular. He was just there keeping the car on the track and keeping himself out of trouble. So, a decent race from the Australian driver to begin. So, in 6th and 8th place, there are Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. And closing the points position in 9th and 10th place, we have both Aston Martins, which can confirm that we really do have 5 top teams at the beginning of this season, obviously, with Red Bull in a league of its own. But probably depending on the track, these 4 teams, Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, and Aston Martin, can be switching positions. But so far, similar as I mentioned with McLaren, Aston Martin also seems to be a little bit behind the Papaya team. But let's see if their upgrades are going to work this year. Fernando Alonso mentioned a little bit before the race that his expectations for the race outcomes were between 9 and 10 place, and he was not mistaken. He was not lying to us. He wasn't sandbagging. He was being honest, and as expected from Aston Martin, they finished on 9 and 10 place. Talking about his Canadian teammate, Lance Stroll, I gotta admit he did such a good race. He was touched by Hulkenberg on the first turn in the first lap, and the Canadian went to last spot on the grid. From there, he had to come back, and Aston Martin did very good calls when asking him to come into the pits. The Canadian driver did a couple of undercoats in both of his pit stop and managed tire degradation quite well, so he could obtain the last position of points in 10th place. So I gotta admit, I really like Lance Stroll's race today, taking into account that he is usually not there. On 11th place and close to the points, but still out of them, we have the Chinese driver from Sauber Stake, upcoming Audi, or as you wish, Guan Yu Zhou. The Chinese driver had a very good first lap of the race, which put him some places ahead from where he began, 17. On the other hand, his teammate had a little bit of bad luck throughout the race. On the first lap, he had to avoid the contact between Hulkenberg and Stroll, and that slowed him down quite a lot, making him lose even more positions and putting almost till the end of the grid, even behind the Alpines. Wang Yuzhou had a decent pace, taking into account the car he is driving, and even though he was on 9 or 10 place for some part of the race, his pace was not enough to keep both Aston Martins behind him, and he was eventually overtaken. Notwithstanding, he didn't finish that far away from Lance Stroll and managed to keep the 12th driver behind him. Valtteri Bottas, as I said earlier, he had bad luck at the beginning of the race and also in one of his pit stops. The Finland driver had to suffer a 52-second pit stop. Apparently, Valtteri and pit stop are not the best friends. Let's remember the occasion where he stopped at Monaco and his tire took almost day and a half to be removed from his car. This time at least, it was during the same race, but that horrendous pit stop made Valtteri lose an immeasurable amount of time, placing him on 19th place at the end of the race. On 12th position, we have Kevin Magnussen. The first of the Haas drivers for this race was the number 20. Kevin has shown us that apparently Haas have some of their problems solved out about tire degradation. Because, yeah, he didn't manage to achieve points, but let's be honest, were we expecting them to achieve some points? Obviously not. But we were just expecting them to be closing the grid and fighting with the Alpines. And that didn't happen. Kevin had a good race pace and was close to Guan Zhou. Also, he was capable to keep both RVs behind him because he had to face Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo on the last stages of the race. Talking about his teammate Nico Hulkenberg, it was really such a shame that he couldn't take advantage of starting the race on 10th place, because if he had a similar pace than the one shown by Magnussen, probably, just probably, he could have reached that last 10 spot and obtained 1 point for his team, which, believe me, they would have been delightful to get. But he got that misjudging at turn 1 with Lance Stroll, and from there, his race was over. Hope that his team continue to improve, and they can give us close battles at least on the midfield. On 13, And for team places, we have both Biseka Shap RV drivers, Daniel Ricciardo on 13 and Yuki Tsunoda in 14. I gotta say, I'm a little bit disappointed of RB's pace. I was expecting a little bit more. I was expecting them to fight for that last spot on the points positions, but they didn't seem to have the pace. The drivers were saying that the car was overheating a little bit, so probably that affect their pace on yesterday's race. But even though, I don't think they are that close to achieve points so far. Something that we have to mention about both RV drivers were the movements that they had or the close contacts they almost had after race. The drivers were told to swap places, so probably they could get ahead of Kevin Magnussen, but none of them was capable. And Yuki was not so for the good of the team when swapping positions with Daniel. And when Daniel didn't manage to get ahead of Magnussen, Yuki was complaining a lot, as expected, on the radio. And when they were on the cool lap, Yuki made a dive bomb on Danny's rig car, where they didn't touch, but even though I understand the feeling that Yuki might felt at that point, I think it was not his best decision. Let's see how things go between these two because the season has just begun and there are 23 races to go. Should we expect more drama among them? We will see. On 15th and 20th place, we have another pair of drivers that was also suffering a lot with some innovations in their cars, and we are talking about Williams drivers. Both of them were having some sort of trouble with their steering wheel. Logan Sargent was the one who suffered the most. He lost an immense quantity of time, even having to pull his car out of the track. And at that moment, everybody was thinking like, "Oh my gosh, safety car, virtual safety car." Not a red flag because the situation was not that dangerous, but maybe a virtual safety car would have been okay. Logan Sargent, you can think about it next time. A safety car, like no, this doesn't work and it's not gonna work. About his teammate Alex Albon, we could observe during the race images that his steering wheel was almost shouting at him that it was too hot and that he needs to cool it off, or it could be terminal. So both Williams drivers couldn't take advantage of the top speed their car has. Now they have to wait for next race in Saudi Arabia, where let's see if they had a better performance. Now, the last two drivers to mention, not the last positions, but the last two drivers to mention are both Alpines, Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly. Both French drivers were nowhere to be seen. The only battles they had were at the beginning of the race, trying to get some good spots, and they took advantage indeed of the incident between Hulkenberg, Stroll, Bottas, but out of it, they were nowhere. They are really, really slow. I don't know why Alpine or how it was possible that they mistaken the concept of their car for this season. Hopefully, they can bring upgrades soon and be closer to the rest of the team, so at least they can battle other drivers besides themselves. And I really do believe that the only reason they didn't finish on 19th and 20th, where they started the race, is because the horrendous and terrible bad luck Valtteri Bottas and Logan Sargent suffered. Because if it wasn't for that, I am sure they would have finished last on the grid, or maybe not even yet finished.
And that's it for today's video. If you enjoy it, please give it a like, put a comment below with some suggestion, and so far, see you someday. And remember, it's lights out.